I've got 5 tips that are guaranteed to make your push-ups better. Whether you're struggling to get 1 push-up or you could crank out over 100, this video is for you. All right, so tip number 1 is how do I make push-ups easier? Now this is kind of geared a little bit more towards the beginner side of the spectrum, and so if you can't get 1 push-up, or maybe if you can get 5 or 10 push-ups, you're going to want to make them a little bit easier so that you can start cranking out a few sets of multiple reps of push-ups so that you can continue to progress. And the way that we do that is by kind of subtracting some of the resistance using a few different techniques. So the first and the easiest technique that you can do is to go on your knees. So instead of doing a push-up on the floor on your feet, basically drop to your knees. That's going to reduce the total amount of weight and you can start doing more push-ups. The second thing that you can do is to jump into an incline push-up. So now we're basically gonna incline our body, and that's going to basically reduce it's gonna change the angle at which gravity is acting upon you, and it's going to reduce the amount of resistance going into your chest muscles, which will make them easier to do. So those are the most basic ways to add assistance to your push-ups, but maybe you don't like those ways, or you can't do one or the other, or you just want more control over how much assistance you're getting. That's where we can bring in a couple more methods, but now we're gonna use some 41-inch resistance bands so that you can fine-tune the resistance or the assistance that you're getting by using different strength resistance bands. And there's a couple of ways that I like to set this up. The first way is to basically wrap this band around your arms. So I'm gonna loop it around one side, and then fold the band in half with my other arm, and then loop the end on my first arm again. And now we're basically gonna have this resistance band out in front of us that is basically pulling our arms into that fully extended position. And now we can get into our push-up stance. Drop down into our push-up stance, get our shoulder width grip here, bring ourselves up, and now when we go down, basically that resistance band is gonna basically provide assistance, and it's only at the bottom, so it's gonna get strong at the bottom to help you get off the bottom of the rep, and then at the top it's gonna lessen, and then you're gonna basically be able to squeeze out a full push-up. And like I said before, you can fine-tune this assistance no matter where you're at in the strength level. And also you can use it to progress up and down in the sets. The other way we can add assistance with bands is to use a high anchor point and then basically tie your band to it, whether you got a wall anchor or a door anchor strap or a pull-up bar or something high. We can basically take this band, jump inside of this loop, and then find kind of the sweet spot for where this thing is gonna land when we go down into our push-up stance. And for this case, it's gonna be right around my waist. And then we're just gonna jump down into our push-up stance. And now we have that band is basically picking us up off the floor in much the same way, except now the band isn't around our arms. And I'd say this is probably a lot more comfortable, and also it doesn't give you as much assistance. So it's just another good option to try. All right, that brings us into tip number 2, which is basically the opposite of tip number 1. How do I make push-ups harder or more difficult? It's very simple. We just add more resistance. And you can do that a couple of different ways. The most logical way, right, is to just throw some weights on your back, whether you have some plate weights, dumbbells, kettlebells, or even like a weighted vest, stuff like that. You can basically just add right to your back. The hard part is getting into it. So you gotta find a way to be able to get these weights up onto your back in the right spot, keeping everything nice and balanced, getting into our proper push-up form, and then we can just grind out the push-ups like we always do. And then when you're done, you're gonna have to find a way to deload the plates or whatever. And that is a great way to add resistance. Another way, which is probably easier to do, especially if you're training by yourself, is to use a resistance band. 41-inch band. I like to take it and wrap it around my back. So I basically bring it right up, kind of the bottom of my shoulder blades, hook it into my thumbs, and boom, we have added resistance. Very easy to set up, very easy to get into. And we're just doing push-ups with the added resistance. Now, you're gonna notice a difference here in the profile or the progressive resistance between the two methods. So the plate weight obviously is gonna be constant added load all the way through. The resistance band is gonna be easier at the bottom and then more difficult as you go up and stretch that band out. So it's just two different ways to add resistance to your push-ups. All right, moving on to tip number 3. We're gonna get a little bit more advanced here and we're gonna talk about how to target different areas of the chest using different forms of a push-up. There's 2 main variables that we're gonna adjust here. The first is the angle at which we are doing the push-up. So if you're doing push-ups at an incline, that is going to target more of the lower area of your chest. And as we flatten it out, it's basically gonna shift that target up higher. So if you're doing a flat push-up, that'll be balanced across the upper and lower pecs. And then if you go to a decline push-up where you're slanting downwards, that is going to target more of the upper chest and the front delts. The second variable is hand placement. So a close grip is going to give you basically targeting the innermost portion of your chest, as well as it's gonna engage a lot more triceps in the exercise. A mid grip or around shoulder width, that's gonna be kind of balanced between the inside and the outside of your chest muscles. And then a wide grip is going to hit the wide portion or the outside of your chest muscles, but it's also gonna limit your range of motion and you're not gonna be able to get as good of a contraction at the top of the push-up. All right, tip number 4 is how do I make push-ups more comfortable? And one thing you might notice, especially if you're just doing push-ups flat on the ground, it may put a decent amount of stress on your wrists because they're bent at this 90-degree angle. You might not be used to that, especially when you're putting high loads and a lot of reps through these things. One thing that I like to do is use like a dumbbell or a neutral grip. They make like push-up handles and stuff like this that you place on the floor, and now you have a nice area to grab onto, and it keeps your wrists in a neutral position. Another added benefit to this, and this is typically how I do my push-ups every week, is when you're doing this exercise, you now have control over the angle at your grip as well as how much stretch you place on the pecs. So you're actually able to go deeper when you have some kind of handles like this, and that's gonna give you even more benefits and more engagement of those chest muscles. The other thing that can make push-ups more comfortable is just making sure to use proper form. So when you're doing this and you're getting down into a push-up, obviously a lot of people already know this, but just to reiterate, we're gonna be in like a plank position. So that means that everything, basically we have a straight line running from our ankles all the way up to the top of our head. Some people will get a really arched back like this. That can be uncomfortable and it's poor form. You're not gonna be getting good chest muscle engagement that way. Or if you're the other way, your butt's way up in the air and you're doing push-ups, well, this isn't really working the chest muscles. You're doing almost an overhead press at that point. And that can be uncomfortable in this position. So that's why we like to be in this nice flat plank position, pulling in our core muscles tight and engaged, and then cruising through the push-ups and feeling it in the chest muscles. Like that's where we're trying to drive all the load is into these chest muscles, into our triceps, and then of course you're gonna get a little bit of shoulder activation as well. And last but definitely not least, tip 5, how to progress with your push-ups. Now that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but here's 3 things that I want you to focus on when it comes to progressing in your push-ups. The first thing is, if you want to get better at something, you got to do it often. You got to put in the reps. So I recommend throwing some push-ups in at least once or twice a week in your training routines. The second is building strength in the key muscle groups that are being utilized by the push-ups. So we're talking chest, we're talking shoulders, we're talking triceps. So I want you doing pressing style exercises. Bench press, overhead press, tricep pushdowns, skull crushers. All those kind of exercises are going to help you build strength in your push-ups. And honestly, like, I rarely train push-ups. I never said, I'm trying to get better at push-ups. I focus mostly on hypertrophy and strength training, which is all the exercises that I just mentioned. And over time, I naturally just got better at being able to do push-ups because those exercises are basically the same thing. And the third thing is progressive overload. So instead of cranking about 50, 100, 150 quick, fast, easy reps, focus on the 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 20 super challenging and controlled strength building, hypertrophy generating repetitions by making them very challenging, so that when you get to that top end of the rep range, 10, 15, 20 reps, it's like you fail out. It's extremely challenging. And I think you're gonna see faster gains and just better performance with that method versus chasing reps. All right, so that wraps up the 5 tips for better push-ups. Let me know in the comments which tips were your favorite. Any questions or anything like that, just throw them down in the comments. We want to get some discussion started on this topic. We want to help you get better at push-ups. Furthermore, if you liked what you saw today, be sure to smash that like button. Also, if you want to see more content like this, check out the on-screen video links. We got tons of chest exercises and workouts for at-home training just like this for you. And if you need any of the bands or accessories shown today, be sure to head over to clenchfitness.com. We will hook you up, and thank you for watching.